Excited to be here again, and hello to everybody who was maybe caught our session yesterday. Today we're going to build on what we talked about yesterday, but also going to do a quick review for those of you who are new. But today will be a little bit more technical in terms of setup, as well as in terms of the challenges that orgs can face and teams can face as they kind of adopt agentic AI. So a quick introduction to us. I'll just do me again very fast, and then we'd love to hear from Lucas and hear about some of the really cool problems that you have to solve for if you're helping people solve that very critical thing that's right there with death, unfortunately. It's the reality of taxes. It doesn't have to be as bleak, fortunately, especially when you use something like Taxfix. So AMP is what we call agentic infrastructure, and what we use agentic infrastructure for consumer applications. And what that means is a layer of infrastructure that provisions an agent for every end user. And so what you can imagine is just a field force of agents, one-to-one with your users, and you manage those agents in their tactical decisions around how to communicate effectively with your customers. AMP was founded in late 2020. We're backed by a bunch of great funds. We're used by a bunch of customers all over the world. We've got team members in 16 countries and growing. But what's much more exciting to hear about today is from Lucas himself. So Lucas, please introduce yourself in terms of the kind of work you do, and then we'll also talk a little bit about Taxfix.
Cool. Thanks, Paul. I'm Lucas Masu. I'm head of MarTech for Taxfix. I'm based in Córdoba, Argentina, and I lead a team of like 12 people between product managers, designers, data people, and engineers. And a little bit of Taxfix. I know these numbers are not overwhelming. Being in San Francisco, this is like every Tuesday afternoon for you guys. But for a German company, it's pretty big, especially in the tax and financial service area. The company has been around for a while now. It has had like 400 employees for the last 3 years. So there was a lot of rotation as the strategy realigned, and there was a lot of M&A. So far, we got more than 200 million in funding, and that's euros. So it's a little bit more of that in US. And I think the most important part is this. More than 8 million tax refunds have been filed through the platform. And that is like a lot of money going back to regular people who contribute to the economy, and they get money back when they file their tax refund. And that's what we do. We get. That's how I want to see it. We give people money back. So that's it for Taxfix.
It's not always about sort of big numbers, though. It's often just the complexity. I think we underrate the impressiveness of these numbers. Actually, I always remember that it was the German 19th century poet Goethe who called double entry bookkeeping one of the most impressive inventions of human mind. To solve for taxes in a place like Germany is no trivial thing. Let's just dwell on that for a second, just because it illustrates a lot of the complexity that most consumer businesses are solving for, but just at a really, like an intricate depth, right? You can't just order a burger. You got to go through a process, and the application is helping you go through that process. Can you just give us some examples of what's some of the challenges of solving for taxes?
Yeah, so the tax refund use case is pretty tricky in the sense that you cannot manufacture the trigger for it. Like if you're done, you're done. You're not going to do it again. It's not e-commerce or, I don't know, ordering something online. There's another nuance. The seasonality is pretty awkward, especially in Germany. We have like a camel shape seasonality. It gets high around February when people get their pay slips, which is like a summary of all their income, and they're ready to file the taxes because that's required. And then interest goes down and then picks up at the end of the season towards end of June, July, where all the slackers realize that they're in trouble if you don't do it. Then it peaks and it dies until the end of the year. You only have people doing previous years, because in Germany you can file up to 4 years in the past, right? So end of this year, you're losing your opportunity for fiscal year 2021, right? So it has a lot of nuances. What resonates at the beginning of the year doesn't resonate anymore in July, and has nothing to do with what people wants to hear about throughout the low season of Q4. So that, and on top of it, the life cycle is also kind of long. It could last weeks sometimes, and it doesn't have to be like continuous. They can start in February and finish in July and work on it like 1 week in February and 1 day in July. So it's pretty nuanced, and that is one of the reasons why you get to a point where traditional CRM doesn't do the trick anymore, because you get stalled in like email engagement, push notification, and also in particular in Germany, people is less and less willing to enable or subscribe to email or opt in for push. So it's getting trickier and trickier over time.
Yeah, Luke was talking a lot about the macro factors, but if we think again about consumer psychology, taxes are inevitable, and yet we do a really good job of avoiding the inevitable. And it's because it's complex. If we think about personalization, there's no way taxes can be generic, because it's specific to your situation, how your income is coming in, how your conditions are there. And so you got to communicate all of that, but you also got to communicate under probably pretty severe guardrails, because it's a sensitive topic and you can't, say whatever you want. You got to make sure you're accurate, and you got to be contextual to be useful. And the alternative is for somebody to go, because they have to do the taxes. The alternative is to go work with maybe an in-person advisor, which is either means they're losing their reimbursement, they're losing their refund when they really need it, or they're just spending a lot of time when they also need that time. So it's a fascinating problem, and like you said, Lucas, like conventional CRM has a lot of limitations. I showed this yesterday, but it's just worth thinking about, because if we want to communicate with end users and help them solve for their taxes, we got to think about all the data sources that we have to pull in, and then we got to think about all the different channels and ways that we can send a message. And right at the heart of it is just humans setting up those rules and just sort of deciding what to do and when. We'd love to hear maybe a little bit about the setup at Taxfix and some of the challenges you guys faced.
Yeah, of course. There was a situation at the beginning of the project where I was just ramping up, and I asked, what are the requirements? And one of the guys said, we want everything. And I was like, what do you mean by everything? Literally everything. Every event, with every payload, with every custom attribute, we want everything. And there were some limitations to it. Of course, we cannot just go all the way and share everything. And the number one blocker was PII. Because of the way things were set up, it was impossible for us to share everything as another destination and segment, and we had to do some custom work there.
Yeah. A lot of MarTech today operates under a little bit of the illusion that if you just have data, you can solve every problem, and quickly you face the problem of moving data around and realizing that in its full event complexity, it's very hard to work with. So you start to aggregate it, you start to limit it. And one of the challenges of adopting agentic AI is to sort of step away from those aggregations that are very comforting, that are very safe, and that have lower friction in terms of accessibility. Mm-hmm. And so that's, I think, one of the things that Taxfix did really well is to think through that, step back from some of those assumptions, in order to enable agents to have that much richer context that's in the event stream.
Totally. And the reason we thought of Aampe was because our opening rates were going down, the retained submissions were stalling, and the level of engagement with opt-in, like people want opt-in more and more with this fear of getting their data leaked and getting in trouble for that. So we realized that things like timing and having a message that resonates for very specific audiences was becoming more and more necessary. And at some point, when you only work on the area of what you know, you hit a ceiling, and it's not about talent anymore. It's about like everything that could have been optimized has already been optimized, and you have to look away from it and get in the territory of what you don't know. And that's how we thought Aampe was going to be able to help us, right? Like having these agents that look at things that might not have like logical connection, but they do have a connection. And when that kicks in, then magic happens, right?
Yeah, and timing is a great example. You gave the notion, right, that a tax is seasonal, and yet we want to get people to think about it in advance so they can prepare, so they can solve a lot of problems. Timing is a great example of this, where I think Matthias had a great slide yesterday showing that from the context of food delivery and ride-hailing, you can structure a day in a way that makes a lot of sense. It's like send a message about food at 12 p.m., send a message about something else at 3 p.m. It's all very structured and consistent. And you can do something similar in terms of taxes. You can say taxes is 60 days out, taxes is 30 days out. And if the message isn't resonating, if it's not specific, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, it doesn't do much because it's not responsive to the end user. And so what Agentic AI represents is when we attach an agent to a user, the agent can be responsive not just to the time, but to the intersection of time and what we're sending. And so they start to respond, and then they start to kind of slow down and speed up based on how they see that user responding. So the concept of how it works, and this is where we're going to get technical for a little bit, is that we put agents and we connect them to all those data streams. Now, connecting to those data streams has its challenges. The opportunity is that if we do that, the agents can operate across that rich context. And then we connect the agents to the various surfaces we can message across. So push notifications, emails, the actual in-app experience as you're completing your taxes. And instead of having that human in the center, connecting the dots between the different events and the different campaign contexts, et cetera, we have the agents making those decisions. But because it's fully ingesting everything, there are technical complexities to that. So maybe, Lucas, you want to talk a little bit about how you guys thought very innovatively and thought around problems in terms of how you can make AMP and make agents computationally efficient as well as secure and compliant with government rules, which again, in Europe, are pretty strict.
Sure thing. So as I mentioned before, Segment is our single event bus. All the marketing data and user interaction data goes through that platform. And when we got this requirement of getting everything but the PII, we thought that was going to be easy. It's just a destination function. We've done it before. But then we realized that everything meant a lot of events. Like, for example, this is, it's not visible here, but it's like more than 15 million events only in 2 weeks, and we are off season. So that meant that unless we wanted to have like a 2x increment or on our segment bill, we had to come up with a different way because computational cost of a destination function was super high. We didn't see that one coming, but because of that, then we realized that if we were supposed to block PII on the source level, then we were going to break the rest of the integrations that do have the right to see PII. So if we did it here, then it was going to be super expensive. So we came up with a solution of using a native functionality in Segment that is called a repeater that we weren't aware of, that serves the purpose of a destination function that just broadcasts the same events back into the source. And then we created a special source for AMP events where we will trim all the PII, and then an AMP destination that will receive everything but the PII without impacting on the segment build. So that was one of the nuances of the integration, I'll say.
And the idea that we built again on yesterday was that any business has a complex infrastructure already. No business is starting from a blank slate when they're implementing Agentic. There's a lot of complexity to it. And so the idea is that software, if it's Agentic, should be able to be responsive, should be able to interoperate with the tools you have in place. And the job of the human is to think strategically about the trade-offs involved with potential uplift, potential costs. And if you design it that way, you can allow for that creativity to solve for the problem. It doesn't have to be a blocker. It's an opportunity to solve for it. And then you can derive real results. AI doesn't have to be this thing that you POC in a small box and never get into the real world. You can get it into the real world. when you've designed it to be robust to that complexity. Now, last thing I want to talk about before we can get into some questions is that because of the sort of psychological complexity of taxes, right? We all are deferring for different reasons. We all have our own concerns. We all have our own fears about why we're putting it off. For an agent, for a human to learn that, they have to pay attention to what your concerns are as they guide you through that process. And so if we want agents to be able to do that, because agents are more scalable, we have to give them the capability of learning at that incremental level. So we talked a little bit about that yesterday in the context of food, and it's just as true in the context of taxes. That if we can instrument and track the very small subcomponents of what we're communicating to users, then we can optimize, we can learn over time. And the result is that you go from having a single fixed message in your platform that you just blast everybody that just says, hey, welcome to Taxfix, or hey, get your taxes done, to millions of possible messages that emphasize that, hey, it's don't worry about the complexity, we've got you, versus there's a lot of money waiting for you that's going to be great for you and your family. So many ways to frame that. So this becomes the vision. This is what you want to achieve. And again, there's always hidden complexity, and then it's about how you solve for that. How do, in a world with Agentic where we're generating many possible conversations, how do we make that possible and get into a little bit of the technical depth here? So Taxfix has been doing some really cool work using an assembly of different pipeline tools. And Lucas, please tell us a little bit about it.
Sure, of course. The same way that we didn't see it coming, I want everything when it came to events and attributes, because we came from a perspective of there are 3 or 4 events that Fire canvases embrace. There are 3 or 4 attributes in the user profile that will define one segment or the other. The same thing happened when it came to content. When you have a canvas with 10, maybe 15 emails, it's really hard to conceive a scenario where you have thousands of potential combinations, not just 10 or 20, right? And also the level of fragmentation of that content. Like when you're in like a regular traditional CRM, you create the entire message. In here, you don't create the entire message. You create components of the message, like, I don't know, subject, the greeting, the value prop, the call to action. And then the engine will do the mix and match and try to find what resonates the most with the user. So there was zero way that for us to do that manually. Like we have one person that is like our head of copy systems, and he has a couple of freelancers working with him for everything, including product copy. So there was zero chance he will have the bandwidth to feed the engine the ginormous amount of content that was required. So we thought that we will reuse some automation we had in NA10 for other email use cases. And that was, of course, a failure because of the reasons I just mentioned, right? Like fragmentation and volume. So we shifted to a spreadsheet, of course, that will take the different components and the attributes of the component, like the labels for tonality or the message that you want to talk about, because there are different things that might resonate with people seeking safety and not getting in trouble, other people seeking the money because they need it, other people just looking for convenience. And then we created a script that will put placeholders for every component of the message, and will replicate all the inputs like tonality, message, what component it is, etc. Give you the copy, and then as a comment on every single piece of content, the prompt that was executed for each of the pieces of copy. And right now we're getting in trouble because this spreadsheet is out of control. It probably has like 100 of active cells as input, different areas for the system prompt, for the user prompt, how to combine the different inputs. And at this point, we're thinking of actually building a tool with proper project management, QA, different access levels. And also because even we're not even close of hitting the limit of tokens that modern models have which I think Gemini Pro is like 2.5 is like 1 million input tokens. We're probably, with the system prompt, we're probably around 60,000, and the user prompt is around 1,000. But the stuff that you add at the end doesn't have the same prevalence, and it's frequently ignored. Even we're really far from the limit. So there is a second piece of the equation, which is QA. So even if your system prompt is complete and all the instructions are there, sometimes the model will decide to ignore some of them, especially the ones at the end. So you have to run another one to check that the copy is actually properly created. And in the tax arena, it's very nuanced, because there are some words that you cannot use, even there are synonyms with words that are recommended, especially in German. Like, you change two things in a message and you get in trouble because you're legally, it's not possible for us to provide tax advice. We can do the tax filing, but we're not entitled to provide tax advice. And there is zero chance that someone will manually go one by one, right? So what we created was a very easy to use QA system that will highlight the potential errors in red, and then the curator will go through it and delete the ones that have errors and regenerate those. And at the same time, we will capture a system prompt that will prevent that problem from happening again. And we put it both on the system prompt and the QA prompt. So that's how it works.
This can be hard to grok in a quick take, but the elegance of the design is pretty incredible. But remember where we came from. We came from the world of just wanting to understand people and understand where they are and how to communicate with them. And to kind of solve for that problem, we have the opportunity to actually use technology to expand our creativity and do it in a structured way to allow us to be also compliant and effective and trackable and auditable. And actually, I want to point a shout out is that when we started working together, they had a copywriting team. And a few months in, they created this concept of a copy systems lead, because what real personalization means is content creativity production at scale, and measuring and managing the complexity that is the reality. Just think, it's like when you got 1 million customers, there's a lot of people, you send 10 campaigns, that's okay, it all makes sense. But you don't want to do that, because all those 1 million people are unique and distinct. So if we're going to have 1 million conversations, how do we make sense of them, and how do we provision for them without just sort of loosely putting an LLM out and letting it say whatever it wants? It doesn't work, but there are ways to make something that does work and that's super effective. So maybe quick takeaways, and then we'll see if anybody's got some questions.
Sure. So it's very tempting, if you're coming from traditional CRM, to carry over your mental models and think of triggers and audiences. Like, I want my segments, I want my triggers. It's very normal, but from our experience, that was a mistake. That's what we did at the beginning. And then we realized that we were crippling the model, we were crippling the engine. Because of that, the engine doesn't care about large segments or triggers. It cares about everything and nothing at the same time. And we don't have to, it's not a good idea to try to force your logic into it, because it's a losing game. The second thing is about the size or the magnitude of the experiments, right? Don't think you are going to run another CRM experiment when you evaluate one of these tools. The amount of content that these things can take is huge, and that is actually a good thing, and it's a differentiator, so you have to empower the model with lots of content, and also stop thinking about testing with 10% of your audience, because that's also crippling the model, crippling the engine. You have to test with as many users as possible, of course, considering the risks, but the more the merrier, because that will fasten the learning curve of the engine, and you'll start seeing results faster. And finally, play the long game. And because there is a huge difference between traditional experimentation and experimentation with AI, which is the variations that you test traditionally are static. They're the same. You go day 1, day 10, day 20, they're the same variation. With AI models, variation evolves. And as it evolves, it becomes better. So trying to evaluate a model with 10 days of an experiment or 20 days in an experiment It doesn't make any sense. I think we should see it like a strategic investment and just make it happen and make it work. That will be my advice.
Yeah, cool. Super exciting. All right. So, any quick questions, thoughts, anything we can clarify or speak to? Yeah, please.
Hi. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to the amount of effort that it took up front to set up all the infrastructure to be able to run this engine. So I think traditionally in marketing, and this is a bit of the flip, like you start small and light, you prove that something works, and then you go big on the infrastructure. And it seems like in this case, you have to put a pretty big investment up front and go big with it before you're going to be able to prove that this is actually going to work for the business. So we'd love to hear a little bit about the upfront infrastructure work.
Of course. Actually, I had the same impression before we started the project. But then when we realized that having a single event bus was pretty much 90% of the work, and the rest was just trimming the PII, I would say that we got it running like in less than 2 weeks. And then we realized about the cost problem, and then we have to switch. And switching was actually cheaper because we were using native functionality from Segment. So that was another week for the data infrastructure to be done. I think the heavier lifting was to set up the experimentation tracking to see whether things were working or not. But because we did it the wrong way, because we wanted to test specific audiences and monitor audiences individually, and then you run into all these data inconsistency problems where, I don't know, the control will have 1.5 million users in the audience, and then Aampe will have 1.2, and then they're not comparable. But it was a conceptual error. It wasn't an intrinsic complexity of the integration. It was because we were thinking in terms of the legacy CRM instead of the agentic CRM.
Having built systems for so long, it's been so fascinating to see that the obstacle really is not the technical setup. It's the mindset. Mm-hmm. It's that it's very hard to shift the mindset. And that's why we've invested so much in support to shift that mindset and to kind of help clarify. We're so excited when folks like Lucas help educate the community to how you can make that shift. But technically, that's not the block. That's not the reason not to move forward. It's putting in the effort to think through what it involves and being open-minded to it, and then following through and then driving to results. And I think you consistently do see those results.
100%, especially because of, nobody considering a tool like this is a fresh out, right? You've been around. You've been around, you have your mental models, you have your functional and structural fixedness, and you already see reality in one way. Like, for example, duration of experiments, the percent of the audience that participates of an experiment, the fact that the variation doesn't change, the fact that the variation is predefined. You design variations most of the times in the traditional world. You don't design your variations here. You feed the beast and let the beast do the thing. And once you realize that you're looking at the problem from the wrong angle, then everything makes sense, and all the complications, they evaporate because they were made up. You made them up, right? So when you think about it, it's actually one of the easiest tests ever because you don't have to do anything. And that's the hard part, right? You don't have to do anything. Just feed the content. That's it.
Although I would say the elegance of some of what they've done is not nothing, actually. But I would say it's not heavy manual effort. It's, again, like elegance in design and creativity and thoughtfulness about what the problems your customers are facing. Anything else? Any other questions? But a great question. I think I really love to see that point made.
I have a question about risk. With you first start it and it's sending and you got messaging going out, it could go bad real quick. Or am I just making that up?
Well, tell us a little bit more what you mean by it can go bad real quick.
If it's an inappropriate message. So I'm assuming, how much control do you have over that? And I'm just not making the mental leap here.
It's a great point. And I had the same feeling. It's like, what if we send some weird message, right? And it happened, of course, it happened. We're a tax solution, again, not a manufacturable trigger for a use case. So if you're done with your taxes, and I send you a message right after you finished, you're still in time to file your taxes. You're going to get confused. It's like, what happened with my submission? It went through, there was an error, you freak out, right? That was a very bad scenario, right? And it happened to 17,000 users, which is a lot. The main reason for it was because Segment was unsuccessful sending the event. It wasn't part of the design of the model. It was because there are some events that for some reason were incomplete in terms of payload. Like I think some of them were missing a time zone for some reason. I don't know. We should ask Segment. And they're pretty expensive. They should have an answer for that. And it was not what we expected. What was the risk of sending a wrong message in my mind? It's like that the greeting wasn't going to match the value prop or the call to action, like some inconsistency, but you can actually fine tune that with the labels and only create content that matches the next piece of content and the next one, right? And back to the issue we had, that is actually triggering the third version of the integration, which is not using Segment at all, and just exposing the data of the events and the attributes directly from our data lake to Aampe. That is the contingency plan for that risk. So, yeah.
So just very quickly to summarize, systemically, you definitely can't use a language model and let it say whatever it wants. You have to have review processes. You do the same thing with your humans. If you hire 100 people, you don't put them out in the field and let them say whatever they want. You put them through training. So you have to do something similar with agents. And then you do have risk whenever you do anything. And I think the thing is that traditionally we do one thing, and then we wait 4 weeks, and we do another thing, and we wait another time, we do another thing. And so what agents allow you to do is do more of those things faster, which means you uncover problems faster. I would argue that that is not a feature, that's not a bug, that's a feature in the sense that you would have found those problems manually, you would have just found them a lot slower, and the counter risk is not doing anything and not innovating and not surviving in the sense that your customers are looking for alternative solutions that do help them progressively, because we don't live in a world where you can do one thing and you're just done. And so the ability to solve those and uncover those problems faster is a big part of what agents help you do. One last question.
You spoke about shifting the mindset. What I'm wondering is like how difficult it gets as the complexity scales. You think big enterprises with too many minds to shift.
I don't know, that sounds really exciting to me. Like, really. Like, I think that's nothing we have to fear. It's just progress. It's just, yeah, how cool is it to change an organization and allow it to actually thrive at scale and actually manage complexity? What's much worse, in my opinion, is exactly what happens, is you get bigger and you don't change and you don't evolve and you don't try things. And so smaller business come and take your place. I think there's a lot of benefits to large enterprises that have worked over time, that have learned things, that can be managed, that can be captured, and we can all benefit from. And so enabling Agentic to allow them to benefit from that experience, but actually continue to innovate forward, to me, that's super exciting. That's nothing to be afraid of. That's the opportunity. That's what you want. And yeah, it's hard, but it's worth it. Would you say it's worth it, Lucas?
100%. In our case, we're not like a large enterprise, but we have suffered from this transition not being made on time, right? And again, we were having LeBron James invited to a soccer match and then complaining why he wasn't scoring, right? It's like, if you have LeBron, let him play basketball, right? And that means stop or don't try to force the tool to work as a traditional CRM. And if we want to like zoom out and abstract the concept, that is basically not thinking in terms of A or B. And the way it worked for us was we let it coexist and we monitor it. And then we realized that all these fears were just imaginary, and it has risks like any other tool, but they're not different. They're the same. And if you have a good monitoring system, you spot them on time and you fix them. As a matter of fact, thanks to this integration, we realized that we had a serious problem of events being lost in a segment that was also affecting Braze, which is our like legacy CRM, and we fixed it for both. So it's not about the tool itself. It's like it's scarier when, in terms of Jeff Bezos' decision making, you see it as a one-way door. It's a two-way door, and actually you can keep it open. You can keep both open. You can have the old system running next to the new one and monitor it, and also make it complementary. Like for example, at the beginning, the engine is going to struggle because they don't the engine doesn't have enough context, and maybe logic wins. So you probably have traditional CRM for the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then you shift the journey to the agentic one. Or maybe at the beginning, it makes sense to have both depending on different audiences. I don't know. You will figure it out as you let it do its best, right? But the only advice I will give about this challenge is to not force the model to play the old game. Let it play the new game, right? With all the nuances that the new game has. And if it is a very sensitive use case or a very sensitive industry, then have strong monitoring. Do not cripple it for the sake of preventing something bad from happening, because then it's not comparing apples to apples, right?
Well, I don't think I've ever had AMP compared to LeBron James. I feel like I have to end on that note. Thank you so much, Lucas. All the knowledge.
I'll do Messi next time.
And thank you all for being here. And yeah, we'll be around.
Cool. Thanks, Paul.